Welcome back to We Are TPM with myself, Kyle Teixeira. Sitting next to me as always is John Teixeira. This week we are back to discuss should I rent or should I sell? Should I stay or should I go? This is a topic that we have touched on in the past, but we want to rediscuss in current market conditions because it's probably the most common question of the time we are in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And probably in somewhat a premise of our entire podcast. So we're going to get into it. If you have any questions you want to sell or want to rent or want to ask the question that we're about to answer, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. Let's get into it. Joan, should I rent or should I sell? Weigh these options. Why do people weigh these options so much?
Well, there's a whole bunch to this conversation, right? So let's do this. Let's start the conversation with assuming that you don't need the equity from your home to do whatever you're doing, right? So there's a certain portion of people that are trying to make this decision because of a move that they have to make. And in that move, they may need the funds or the equity from their home, right? So if we just take those people out of the equation, let's just talk about people that have an option to either sell or rent.
Well, I guess, yeah, because that's the first question. Our first question in response to this question is, do you need to sell it?
Yeah, because otherwise the rest of the conversation is a moot point.
Well, partially, yeah, because and we'll talk about
if you do.
Yeah.
If you do need it.
You should rent. The answer is you should rent, right? Last time we did this, if
you want to have a really short episode, we could do that if you want, because that's always our answer, right? If you don't need the money, then you should rent.
Yeah, and I guess we want to dive into the reasons behind all this, because I was asked this today. I had a conversation with somebody who is about my age, right? So when I answer these questions, I give them all the back end reasons why, because not everybody knows what we know. Not everybody sees the horizon of this investment journey. But for example, the guy I'm talking to is 30 years old. All right, he has a 2.2% interest rate on his house. 2.2% interest rate, right?
House,
so
buddy.
That is one of the biggest reasons. Is most of the people asking this question today have an interest rate on what should become an investment property that you will never see again. In comparison, an investment, well, hopefully we never see that again, because if we do see those rates again, that means we're in an economic turmoil again. But right now, an investment property, like the same thing we're talking about, would be like an 8.5% interest rate. No,
7.5. But yeah, you're right. It's a huge difference. And I think about a year ago, Kyle, we did a podcast where we threw out a stat. And I don't remember the exact stat, but it was interesting at the time that something like half of the mortgages in the United States were like sub 4% or something crazy like that, maybe even sub 3%. It was an astronomical thing to think about. And what we were saying back then is what this is going to create is a situation where people don't sell their home, right? And that's part of what you're getting at is why would you sell something that could potentially make you money, help you build wealth through asset appreciation, pay down of your debt, right? And cash flow from monthly rent payments. Why would you sell something that is cheaper than it can be, than it would be for anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the price you bought it at and the interest rate that you bought it at. If somebody tries to buy that same house today, it's going to cost them more money and their interest rate is going to be higher. You're going to cash flow a lot more than somebody that buys the same home today.
Well, and one thing he was asking, I like to bring this up because he was asking me conceptually, why, I have about 60, 70 grand in equity. Why wouldn't I just take that, put it into the other one, blah, blah, blah. One of the biggest things for someone who's 30 years old is I'm like, well, what retirement planning have you done, right? We don't like to think about retirement at 30 years old. Well, you've already bought that house. That's step one to retirement, because I'm telling them how, rent rates over time, you have a 30-year mortgage. So over 30 years, your rent rates are going to go up. If you're renting it out for those 30 years, your renter's paying it off. So your renter's paying off the house. He has a $1,200 mortgage that'll rent for $2,000, right? That's $800 in cash flow while it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that really, I'm like, once that house is paid off, that $2,000, ignoring taxes and insurance, right? That $2,000 is straight income. If you have 10 houses, if you spent 30 years doing that on 10 houses, that's $20,000 in income. People think it takes 100 houses to make a realistic retirement income. It doesn't. You can literally do that.
I've been guilty of counting on that for my retirement plan too. But you make a great it is, you make a great point. You should be, I still think everyone should be diversified, but there is less and less people in the United States that have pensions and 401ks, and those things are becoming less and less common. And so even when they were more common, it was still a high percentage of people that didn't have those things, and they didn't have an employer that was contributing to that. And because of that, they didn't have the financial wherewithal to know to set that up themselves and plan for their future. Let's face it, most of us are very short-sighted, and we think about what we want now, and we don't think about the future until the future hits us in the face somehow, right? And then we turn 50, 60 years old, we start thinking about retiring, and we're like, oh crap, I haven't saved enough money to retire. I'm going to have to work till the end of my life, right?
Well, and the fallacy of Social Security, right?
Oh yeah.
So on the way over here, this was interesting because so many people are like, I see, we rent houses, right? We see how many people rely 100% on Social Security to live. And I know people are my age who say, oh, I'll get Social Security, blah, blah, blah. On the way over here, I asked ChatGPT, I'm 28. Will I get Social Security? That's all I asked her, right? And it went into all the reasons why I won't. But essentially, the statistic that is currently the current math on it is it's going to run out by the year you're supposed to get it. You won't even get it.
You know what though?
It won't be fully funded by 2035 is what they said it will.
You know what?
Be tapped.
Everybody said the exact same thing 30 years ago, that my dad and my parents would never see $1 of their Social Security.
Oh well, they'll just start taxing us more. I'm sure that won't actually happen. They'll just tax us more to make sure
somehow they'll kick that down the road somehow. I don't know, but
that's what our government does, right? Kick cans down the road just constantly.
Why do we have inflation right now? Because our government prints money more faster than
Social Security needs money. What's another trillion?
That's right. Just print more of it.
What's another trillion? 2 trillion.
Just fire up the printers. That's all you gotta do.
Jerome Powell. No.
It's a good thing these things aren't based on gold anymore, huh? We'd have miners going crazy somewhere in the world. Gold miners.
And maybe if it was based on gold, we might have some space exploration. I think that stopped when the gold standard stopped, because the only good thing you can find out in space is gold, huh? So,
I think maybe oil. Maybe we're getting sidetracked. Should we rent or not?
Yeah. Should we rent or not? So the answer is, but I'm taking this from a younger perspective, even from really anyone's perspective. The answer is yes, because why not take? The other thing I told him is, if you're talking about a personal residence, so in the reason this conversation got brought up is because he wants to buy another house, right? He wants to move into another house. Well, now you're doing that at current interest rates, and I explained to him how your qualifications will change based on how much house you can buy, assuming your income hasn't changed, right? Since the last time you got qualified. At a 6.5, you can buy a lot less house than you could at 2.2.
It's not real encouraging.
Huh?
That's not very encouraging.
No, it's not very encouraging, but if you rent it and that $800 in this example of cash flow goes towards your income, it increases your qualification.
Yes.
So
back to being encouraged,
right? But if you sell it, you got $60,000 in your pocket, but that does not help your qualifications on buying a new house. So
you're essentially going to downsize instead of upsize.
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, this certain scenario, his income's gone up significantly since then.
So let's go backwards a little bit. We're kind of getting a little bit sidetracked with a specific scenario, and I love it. It's a good scenario. It's a scenario that a lot of people might find themselves in.
Yeah, just trying to make it real and not just a bunch of property managers telling you, yeah, you should rent.
Yeah, no, because Kyle, and we've had this discussion on this podcast before. I'm not always a proponent. I'm not just always a proponent. So what we're talking about right now is we're talking about fiscally, right? Like the fiscal, that's a tough word to say. That's a really hard, the financial decision that you have to make about whether I should do this for my financial wealth or not is almost always yes, right? Mm-hmm. But let's be honest, there's more to this decision than just your financial wealth building, that you should be doing. Because for some families and some personalities, this is the worst thing for you to possibly do, especially if you're not going to let go of the reins and let somebody else do it. If you're thinking about managing a rental property yourself, then you really, really need to look inward and ask yourself if you're the right person to manage this. Can your marriage survive it? Do you have the negotiating skills to handle tenants, contractors, contracts? Do you have all these skills? And for most people, I would say no. Yeah, almost everybody on the planet, I would say you shouldn't do it.
And in the same conversation, that was what got brought up is like, well, I know the answer is yes, I should rent it, but I guess it's just the fear of dealing with it, having two houses, all that stuff. That was the biggest drawback before we even knew all the other information, right? People call it fear, but it's just like a mental weight of having all these things in your life, right? Which
that reminds me of I had a conversation not too long ago with a lender. Mm-hmm. This is an interesting conversation. Like, and actually, it's a guest. Hopefully, we're going to have them on soon. And she was telling me she referred us to a real estate agent client of hers, who bought a house for all the right reasons to rent it out. Tried to rent it for too much money, was not succeeding. Was having trouble finding screening and going through the motions of screening, got frustrated and decided to sell the house and came out to the thing and said, you know what, this isn't working. I'm just going to sell it. What a fear-based decision. Never once did this person, a real estate agent, she said to him, why don't you have somebody else manage it for you? And he said, oh, I never even thought of that. Really? A real estate agent never even thought of having a property manager manage the property for you because you're going through all the pain of trying to do this yourself and realizing how bad it sucks to do it yourself when everybody should have somebody do it for them. I don't have my wife do brain surgery for me. You know why? Because she probably sucks at it.
And you're not willing to find out whether she sucks at it or not.
Exactly.
And that's a testament to how many avenues there are in the real estate business. I mean, in this industry is vast, and there's specialists in all of it. And there's a lot of pride. We see a lot of pride in realtors. They're like, I'm a licensed real estate agent. So, licensed real estate agent can do this, then, why can't I do it? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not your area of expertise. Is every real estate agent going to think they can sell a $5 million home? A lot of them will. They'll probably take that deal, but...
And if they focused on it and they use the skills that they have, if they're a good real estate agent, they probably could. The problem is very few of them actually focus on gaining the skills that they need to do it and the tools.
It's another one of those, doctors are the worst patients, nurses are the worst patients, realtors are the worst landlords.
Cars smoking behind them.
That goes to say that they're slow to hire somebody to do that professional service, but also, they want to gouge their own rent prices, where if someone came to them with advice on what they should rent the property next door for, they'd probably be more accurate.
Well, I didn't mean to turn this into a property management, proponent subject, but it's part of it, right? It's part of the decision. It's like, should you rent? Well,
Well, if you're doing it yourself,
if you're doing it yourself, then you need to ask yourself, do you have the personality for this? And can your lifestyle and marriage and people around you, can they handle it or not? Because it will affect your finances, your stress level, your marriage, your other relationships around you. Maybe you might take it to work if you're really kind of if you really bury that drama deep inside of you, then you might carry that with you to work, and it might affect your work. And there's all kinds of things
if it goes bad, you may throw your hands up. I don't know. We just bought a house that this one still blows my mind. The tenant in there that is getting out has lived there rent free for 4 years.
4 years.
Because the owners didn't want to deal with collecting the rent.
And you know how they dealt with it? They sold the house.
They sold the house
to us. Instead of dealing with it, they sold it to us.
Yeah.
At an extremely cheap rate. I mean, like, the decisions that people make are just absolutely, to us, to you and I, are absolutely insane. Now, while I say that, I do understand the pressures and the way that people end up coming to those decisions. I don't agree with the decision, but I understand how they get there, if that makes sense. I understand the pressures, the noise that they're listening to in their ear. I get it. But still, when you look at it on the surface, the picture you just painted, you let somebody live in a house for 4 years, rent-free, because you didn't know how to handle that situation. And instead of handling it anywhere remotely correctly, you just sold the property with the person in it, so you didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah, and
so I had to deal with it.
Probably would have been you shouldn't rent.
You know how many days it's going to take us to deal with it?
30 at max.
At most 30. I'm going to be disappointed if it takes us 30.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the situations of should you rent, should you sell? There's a lot of different answers to that. But that person should have rented through a property manager, right? That's the answer. Because clearly doing it themselves was a failure, because some people think just owning real estate is a good investment. Well, yeah, while that's true, it's true because of the value that should come from owning real estate, like rent collection and appreciation, because don't have someone in there destroying it.
Let's go through the reasons to build wealth with real estate, okay? And because these are all future topics that we'll dive into on our podcast probably, but the first one that we've already discussed is appreciation, right?
Money's cool.
Money is cool. Money's cool. Appreciation. Cash flow. Meaning like the here and now, right?
Yeah.
Tax advantages,
write-offs.
There you go. If you're like me, it becomes part of your retirement plan.
Don't live off Social Security as your retirement plan. That's a big benefit.
Am I missing any?
I mean, I could name more that all fall probably into the tax advantages.
No.
But
let's not do subcategories.
No subcategory. Cost segregation. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean that's all of them, Peace of mind. Getting the value out of what you own. Because we skated over that 2.2% interest rate, right? Like, even if you sell, you're selling an asset that's tied to something else that has value. In my opinion, 2.2% interest rate on a note is valuable. So you can go, there's other options too. If you do decide to sell, go sell it. See if you could sell or finance it at current interest rates and make 6% on it.
2.2%. Is that a real thing?
It's a real thing.
Do you know that the
saw
banks...
1.8 the
other
day.
No. You know banks borrow that money for 2%?
No, they borrowed it for 0.
No, they used to borrow it at 2%. I don't know if that's still the way of the world in the finances or not, but it used to be 2%. So basically, if you had a 3% note, they borrowed it from the central bank for 2%, and then they're making 1 on it or something.
Well, the reason rates got so low is because the Fed rate got down to 0. So they were getting money from the central bank for nothing, and giving it to us for 2.2%. So,
Got it.
And yeah, that's where the money gets printed.
Well, we're getting sidetracked again. So should we rent or should we not rent? And so
that wasn't the question. the question that
rent
one is.
rent or sell or rent or sell. So
You're asking the question that the owner that just sold us his property was asking. Should
I sell it or rent
should
it?
I rent it or should I not rent it? They decided to not rent it and just let somebody live there.
Okay, so let's talk about it. If you don't have the wherewithal to pay to maintain a property, if it needs a lot of work, if it's a really old property and needs tons of renovation and it's not even livable and you don't have the money to do that, then there's another reason to maybe sell, right? There's another reason to, if you can't be a good landlord, then don't be a landlord, right? Meaning, if you're going to let a dilapidated home get even worse and you're not going to be able to have the means to repair it, or the money that you might spend to repair it is going to add massive amount of stress to your family's budget, then don't do it. That's too stressful, and you shouldn't do that. You should have some reserves.
Yeah,
and there should be a separate business.
There's all these different considerations you can make with investment properties too. The premise of our question is mainly for primary residence, right? It's when you're trying to leave your primary residence. Should I sell? Should I rent? That
Rent.
answer is
Rent.
It's pretty much always rent. And that these interest with these notes people have, it's so easy to say rent because the cash flow is awesome. So yeah.
Didn't you just say that twice?
No, I did not.
Are you sure?
No, I'm pretty sure. So should we rent? Should we sell? I got a box. Should I still rent a box?
So just to recap, what we've done is we've decided that some people can't sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people shouldn't rent their home because of their personality and whether they have the means to do it, right? And those people should still consider renting, but hire somebody to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
In a nutshell, right? So we still think you should rent. You just need to know who you are and make sure you understand that most people should not be doing this themselves. And if you carry the weight of all the details of this rental with you throughout the day and it affects all the relationships in your life, then you shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And from the personal residence standpoint, this is what I told the scenario I said earlier, that if you ask yourself this question, on average, people move every 5 years. So if you ask yourself this every time you move, and you always answer with rent, right? In 30 years, you'll have a whole bunch of properties.
That's how Robert Kiyosaki started.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the most famous stories that people know, right? For some reason, back in the 80s, Steve, or something, when he first came out?
That's Mr. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? That you always like to bring up?
Yeah, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Well, I bring it up because everybody knows his story. Like, so many people for decades have been reading his books and they know his story. And his story is very simply, exactly what you just described. He was in the military, and every time they stationed him to a different station, instead of sitting there and renting and throwing money away, he would buy another house. And he would live in it. And then when they stationed him to a different station, he would rent it out. And
just what I tell every military person that's getting restationed everywhere that I ever talk to. So I'm like, you do this at a 0% down payment. So this is the definition of other people's money.
Right.
You don't even use your own money to do it. So.
And I wonder how many of those houses he still has. I bet you he has them just out of, kind of like a keepsake now. He's got so much money, they're probably just like little keepsakes. Like, here's my first rental.
We know a guy who was about to get out of the military, found this out, started doing this first with us, and then he re-signed. And because I guess talking to him a few years later, I found out, they can request to be restationed, depending, I don't know what he did. He had some specific job where he could request every 6 months, to get restationed to another state or something, right? So every 6 months for his 5-year contract, he would ask to get restationed and go buy a house for the sole purpose to go, because VA has an exception where if they restation you can go buy a new house. Normally you couldn't go redo it after 6 months, but.
Well, and so just to clarify, so people are thinking you can go out and get a VA or an FHA loan like over and over again, the answer is kind of. You can only hold 2 at a time. So the way people end up doing that is basically like this. You get your VA loan, and then you get restationed and you go get a second VA loan, and then that first one is still there, and then say like you get restationed again. So now what? 2, 3, 4, 5 years have gone by. The amount of equity that you've gained in VA loan number 1 has gotten below that 80% mark that they're looking for, and they're able to refinance that into a conventional loan or get rid of that VA PMI. Not PMI, the VA mortgage insurance. And you can do the same thing with FHA. And that's why people are able to get FHA loans or VA loans seemingly over and over and over again. You only have 2 at one time, but by the time you go to get the third one, that first one is eligible to work its way out of the mortgage insurance.
Yeah, and I asked him about that too. I think what he did was before he would leave, he'd refinance it in conventional, because while you still live in it, you could do that at 5% down. So
no, you don't need any down. There's no down.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
they just roll the closing costs into it. So it usually adds a little bit to your principal every time you refinance, but if you're doing it for a strategic purpose, it's a minimal cost.
There's tools out there. That's all. It's all about what's in your tool chest. So, should I sell? Should I rent? You should rent.
You should rent.
You should rent. This is the beginning of the podcast, and
should we keep it at that?
Yeah, just.
Do you just throw an F-bomb out there?
I did. Yeah, that's a new one. You're gonna have to cut that out.
I don't think we've ever done that on this podcast.
I have not done that.
You've never used the word friendly, have you?
No.
Not one time.
Should I sell or should I rent? I think the answer is you should rent. So, all right. If you guys want to rent your property with a property manager named Terra Property Management, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com, and we are out.
Oh, we're doing this instead. Is there tequila in here?